Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive ex-cybersecurity expert builds his dream off-grid home deep in the Rockies, peace is all he craves. But when a mysterious HOA appears overnight with rules, threats, and fire, his quiet life turns into a war for survival. Some lines can't be crossed, others burn. It started like any other late spring morning in the Rockies, quiet, crisp, with that clean pine-laced air you only get when you're miles from the nearest traffic light. I was halfway through my coffee, standing barefoot on the cedar deck I'd built with my own two hands, watching a pair of elk graze by the tree line. 6 years I'd poured into this place. 6 goddamn years. Every nail, every panel, every solar cell on the roof, I installed it, alone. The land was mine, free and clear since 2005, gifted to me through a county auction that most people missed because they were too busy sipping overpriced lattes in Denver. I didn't miss it. I wanted out of the city, away from noise, away from people, and it worked, for a while. The nearest neighbor was a good mile down the ridge, and even they only showed up seasonally to fish or argue about solar tax credits. Most of the time, it was just me, the forest, and the house I built from bones. A perfect setup for someone like me, ex-cybersecurity, still under a handful of NDAS, and happily off the grid with a backup generator, water rights, septic tank, and a landline nobody ever called. That was until the sign appeared. I didn't notice it at first. It was my dog, Bear, half Malamute, half angry noise alarm, who bolted toward the gravel drive, growling like there was a bear in a business suit out there. I followed him down the road, past the old beaver dam, and saw it. Fresh, bold, and aggressively laminated. Right on the edge of the long-abandoned lot next to mine, someone had planted a wooden post with a freshly printed sign. Welcome to Ridgeview Heights, a new HOA community. I stood there for a second, blinking like an idiot. HOA? Here? The lot had been empty since I moved in. I had no idea it even sold. Last I checked, it was tied up in some inheritance fight. Now it was apparently the flagship for some granola-flavored suburban takeover. I felt the first itch of a headache creep in behind my eyes. 2 days later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Not the usual circulars and government reminders, but a slick, white envelope stamped with a tree-shaped logo that looked like it had been stolen off a Whole Foods gift card. Inside was a 4-page welcome packet from a man named Chad Forrest. The contents were as smug as the name. Dear future neighbor, it began. We're thrilled to announce the official launch of Ridgeview Heights, a forward-thinking, sustainable HOA community designed for responsible landowners who value ecological harmony, order, and mutual respect. I had to stop and take a breath before continuing. It got worse. Enclosed, you'll find the proposed HOA charter, community guidelines, and the voluntary agreement for participation. Dues are only $180 per month and ensure access to vital community resources such as road maintenance, lakefront management, aesthetic compliance review, and neighborly accountability aesthetic compliance review. Neighborly accountability. I had to sit down. He was pitching an HOA from scratch. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, and not just pitching, declaring. Included were laughably detailed rules about parking orientation, tree trimming, approved colors for external paint, and, of course, noise guidelines consistent with wildlife preservation goals. At the bottom was a soft deadline for enrollment, plus a phone number and email in case I had any concerns. Concern wasn't the word. Rage, maybe. Bewilderment. Closer, I reread the phrase voluntary agreement 3 times just to be sure. Then I opened my property file. Original deed, topographic maps, parcel number, all stamped, signed, and legally fireproof. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, was there any reference to an HOA. Not even a future provision. The next morning, I drafted a reply. Short, formal, and loaded like a shotgun shell. Dear Mr. Forrest, thank you for your letter. Be advised that my property, parcel ID 89-473-C, does not and will not fall under the jurisdiction of any homeowners association, existing or hypothetical. I decline participation in Ridgeview Heights or any associated initiatives, and I will view future contact on this matter as unwelcome solicitation and potential harassment. Kindly update your records. I printed it, signed it, and walked it down to his mailbox myself. It felt good, slapping that envelope into the slot, like drawing a line in the dirt. But then I saw it. A brand new Tesla Model X parked beside the house on the lot next to mine. Modern, angular, aggressive. The kind of car that screams, "I meditate with a personal trainer and file lawsuits as a hobby." There he was, Chad Forrest, in the flesh, tan, mid-40s, Patagonia vest over a white button-down, aviators, and a smile like he was running for HOA president of the planet. He waved like we were old friends. "Hey there, neighbor." I didn't wave back. "You bought this lot?" "Sure did." "Pretty sweet, huh?" "Wait till you see the plans. Model smart home cabin, full solar integration, and some community features I think you'll love." I raised a brow. "There is no community." He laughed. "Not yet." I said nothing. Just turned around and walked back toward my property, Bear trotting at my heels. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Don't worry, Tom. You'll come around. Everyone wants to be part of something bigger these days." I didn't reply. I just kept walking, staring straight ahead at the trees I'd planted and the home I'd built, because whatever this Ridgeview Heights was supposed to be, I sure as hell wasn't part of it. I should have known that a man who called himself a community architect wouldn't take no for an answer. 3 days after I dropped that letter in Chad's mailbox, a brand new sign appeared next to his driveway, this one on polished cedar with gold lettering that caught the sun like a slap in the face. "Ridgeview Heights. Community begins here." Below it, a smaller placard had been screwed in. "Phase 1 expansion pending. Join now to help guide the future." I stared at it from the edge of my property like it was a radioactive spill. Expansion? Of what? Who? He was the only one here. There were no neighbors to organize, no residents to recruit. It was just me and a guy with a shiny SUV and delusions of suburban grandeur. That night, an email arrived. From Chad, of course. Apparently, he had managed to get a hold of my address. The subject line, "Still time to join the community." The message was even more unhinged than his previous materials. He referred to himself as the interim coordinator of ecological stewardship and claimed that 4 future landowners had already expressed interest in lots bordering the lake zone and were excited to establish guidelines to protect our shared resources. There was a new version of the HOA charter attached, this one 22 pages long, and an early adopter waiver for the first 5 participants. The man was building a fantasy HOA in real time, like a cult leader with a Canva subscription. I didn't respond, but I did take a long walk around my perimeter, checking for anything suspicious. That's when I found the first flag, bright orange, staked into the dirt about 20 feet into my tree line, with a tag that read, "Ridgeview Border Potential Trail Access." The next morning, I pulled the flag up, walked to Chad's property, and tossed it onto his porch. 2 days later, I found 3 more. One near the old shed, one by the propane tank, and one directly behind the lake access trail that I had personally carved out of overgrown brush 3 summers ago. I sent him a second letter. No jokes this time. Certified mail. Signature required. Remove all physical markers from my land immediately. Do not install signage, flags, or any other structures on or adjacent to my property. Any future incidents will be documented and treated as trespass. He signed for it and promptly ignored it. A week passed, then 2. That's when things escalated. First, my irrigation system went down. Not a glitch. Completely fried. When I checked the line, I found the main cable cleanly severed, like someone had taken a pair of industrial shears to it. Then I noticed the words "hindering growth" spray painted across the side of my mailbox. Bright green, sloppy, all caps. Took me an hour to sand it off and repaint it. I checked my security footage from the night before. Nothing. Camera was offline for 2 hours. Cut feed. Coincidence? Not a chance. I resecured the cables and added a second backup battery with an uninterruptible power supply. I wasn't going to be caught blind again. 3 nights later, the dogs woke me up around 2 a.m., both of them pacing, ears perked, growling low. I looked out the back window and caught movement near the propane tank. I went straight to the feed. There he was. A man in dark clothes, face obscured, crouched low with a wrench in his hand, fiddling with the valve. I didn't get a clear shot of the face. He knew where the cameras were, but the outline, the stance, the height, everything screamed Chad. I hit record, saved the footage to an external drive, and made copies. I drove to the sheriff's office the next morning with the footage in hand. That's when I met Sergeant Daniels. A man in his early 50s, square jaw, old-school mustache, and a look in his eyes like he'd seen too many complaints about missing goats and not enough about attempted sabotage. He sat behind the desk with a sigh as I explained the situation, showing him the video. To my surprise, he didn't seem alarmed. In fact, he looked mildly annoyed, not at me, just inconvenienced. "You say you don't know the guy's identity for sure?" he asked. I nodded. "Face is obscured, but I know who it is." He leaned back. "If it's just a hunch, we can't do much with that. It's not like he's breaking into your house." I stared at him. He was trying to open a propane valve in the middle of the night. "That's not a prank. That's a goddamn fire hazard." Daniel scratched his chin. "You have any disputes with this neighbor?" I didn't blink. "He's trying to start a fake HOA and force me into it." I've said no. He's not taking it well. He raised an eyebrow, then offered a weak smile. "Well, you know, these land disputes can get messy. Might be better to sit down and talk it out." I stood up. "I don't need a campfire circle, Sergeant. I need this documented." He nodded reluctantly and took my statement. As I left, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Parked in the side lot behind the station was Chad's Tesla, still dusty from mountain roads. License plate GRWTH89. Daniels and Chad, they knew each other. Back home, I installed another set of hidden trail cams deeper in the woods, ones no one would expect, with IR shielding and motion-triggered alerts direct to my phone. Then I started digging. Property records, business licenses, non-profit filings, anything with the name Ridgeview Heights or Chad Forest. That's when I discovered it. There was no registered HOA, not in the county, not in the state, nothing. Ridgeview Heights didn't exist in any legal form. It was a name, a sign, and a stack of printed PDFs, which made one thing clear. This wasn't a community. This was a con. And I wasn't about to let myself become its first victim. I didn't sleep for more than an hour at a time that week. Every creak in the rafters made me sit upright, and every flicker on the motion sensors had me checking cameras like a twitchy guard dog. I was still waiting on an official response from the sheriff's office, but I wasn't holding my breath. Chad's Tesla kept appearing and disappearing from the parking lot behind the station, and Sergeant Daniels stopped returning my calls. So I called someone who would. Her name was Gina Larson, sharp, seasoned, and unapologetically pissed off at people who thought paperwork was optional when it came to land rights. I'd worked with her once before, years back, when a company tried to install a cell tower half a mile from my property without proper disclosure. Gina ate them alive. She had that rare combination of bulldog precision and southern courtroom charm. The kind of woman who could tell a judge to go to hell and have them say thank you. I sent her everything. The signs, the letters, the footage, the chopped wires, and the not-so-imaginary HOA. She called me 2 hours later. "Tom, this isn't just aggressive neighbor behavior. This is coordinated pressure. And if this HOA isn't filed legally, then he's impersonating a governance body. That's fraud. Glad we're on the same page," I said, "because I think he's just getting started." Within a few days, Gina had pulled the county and state records. No HOA. No articles of incorporation, no board, no filings. Ridgeview Heights, legally speaking, was as real as a unicorn with a clipboard. But it wasn't just that. She dug further. Turns out Chad Forrest wasn't just some overzealous transplant with too much time and money. He had a history. 2 years ago, in a small town outside Flagstaff, a nearly identical situation played out. New development. HOA proposal, pressure on longtime owners to integrate, lawsuits, sabotage, then a house fire. The local paper called it a freak electrical accident. Gina wasn't so sure. A few months after that, Eastern Washington, then Northern Idaho. Same pattern, new HOA proposal property line disputes, then silence. And at the center of it all, Chad, or someone using his business partner's name. See, he didn't work alone. His name was linked to Eco Cluster Communities, LLC, a Delaware-based entity with a confusing corporate tree and a flair for buzzwords like eco-governance and land optimization. It was a shell game. HOAs created on paper, propped up by marketing. Language, then used to pressure or absorb neighboring properties into compliance. And suddenly, I wasn't just a cranky mountain man defending his driveway. I was target number one in what looked a lot like a coordinated scheme to flip rural land by force. We filed a cease and desist letter that same week, official, notarized, and sent by certified mail with backup copies to the county clerk and the sheriff's office. It accused Chad of representing an unregistered HOA, trespassing and placing unpermitted signage on private land, tampering with property infrastructure, and issuing communications that could reasonably be interpreted as extortion or coercion. Gina worded it like a scalpel dipped in acid. It ended with a line I still remember. Any further action conducted under the guise of Ridgeview Heights shall be interpreted as willful misconduct and met with full legal response. 3 days later, my house burned down. I was in Denver when it happened, meeting with Gina, ironically to prepare for a potential restraining order. I got the call around midnight from a neighbor who lived on the far side of the lake. He said he saw smoke, then flames, and called the fire department. By the time they arrived, it was too late. I drove home in silence. My hands shook the entire way. What I returned to wasn't just a house fire, it was an execution. The main structure was gone. Roof caved in, walls collapsed. The solar rig had melted off the side of the house like a deflated tent. The deck, my deck, was nothing but blackened nails. The pine trees on the west side were charred. Even the lake looked darker, like it had absorbed the grief. The fire chief met me at the edge of the property line, flashlight in hand. His face was pale. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "We found signs of forced entry in the sublevel. The gas line was tampered with. Feed lines to the generator were cut. I could barely hear him over the ringing in my ears. He said something about accelerants, irregular burn patterns, probable ignition point being inside the utility room. I nodded, or maybe I just twitched. I walked to what had once been the front steps and stood in the ash. It smelled like plastic, oak, and betrayal. Then came the part that broke me. The hard drives, the backups, the external camera servers. Gone. Except one. Across the lake, my neighbor, the same guy who called in the fire, had a motion camera facing the road. It wasn't meant to catch anything on my property, just monitor his boat dock, but the angle was wide enough to capture something. At 11:47 p.m., a vehicle turned onto my access road. No headlights. Black SUV. It stopped at the edge of the house. A figure exited with what looked like 2 red gas cans. The timestamp matched the ignition estimate from the fire department. We had a lead. I called Gina, then the sheriff, then the insurance company, sent the video, filed the claim, and made it public. No hesitation. I uploaded a still from the footage to the county forum, captioned it simply, "Refused to join a fake HOA. Now my house is ash. This is where we are." It exploded online. By the next afternoon, a local reporter knocked on my truck window while I was sitting in the ruins of my garage, holding Bear's melted collar. "Is it true?" she asked, recorder already running. Was this about an HOA? I looked her dead in the eyes. "No," I said. "It was about control." I never thought ash could feel heavy. But standing there, boots sinking into the soft gray remnants of my home, it weighed on me like concrete. The kind that pours over months of memories and sets fast. The air still stank of chemicals and scorched wires, and I could barely make out where my kitchen used to be. What hadn't been burned had been ripped out. Pipes, conduit, panels. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a freak fire. It was a message, and I'd heard it loud and clear. The footage from the lakeside neighbor's camera wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The SUV was hard to miss, boxy, matte black, with that silent glide you only get from electric motors. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m., was damning. And while the figure who got out never faced the lens directly, they had a specific gait, lean, tall, and fast-moving, and the 2 red gas cans. Not exactly subtle. I clipped the footage, created backups, and posted a screenshot with a blurred timestamp overlay to every local forum, Facebook group, and HOA watchdog site I could find. I didn't name names, not yet, but I didn't need to. Ridgeview Heights was already the talk of the valley, and I made sure it had a title that would stick. New Eco, HOA developer linked to suspicious fire in Colorado mountains. The reaction was nuclear. Locals shared the post, tagging neighbors, council members, journalists. Someone even emailed it to a Denver investigative desk. My inbox flooded within hours, but none of that changed the fact that I had nowhere to sleep. The insurance adjuster came out the next morning, walking carefully across the burned-out foundation like it was sacred ground. "We're calling in fire forensics," she said. "This looks intentional." "No kidding," she gave me a side glance. "You think this was retaliation?" I think I told a man to back off with his fake HOA, and 3 days later, someone torched my house. "You tell me." She nodded, lips pressed thin. We'll expedite the claim. But it's going to take time. The one thing no one ever actually has. Gina came up later that day. She didn't flinch when she saw the wreckage. She just took out her phone and started documenting. "Did you get the footage from across the lake?" she asked. "Yeah. It's already in every inbox that matters," she smirked. "Good. Because I just got a call from a reporter in Boulder who says she's been tracking Chad for over a year." "Oh. Apparently he's been bouncing from county to county under different LLCs. Ridgeview Heights is just the latest rebrand. I wasn't surprised. Pissed, yes, but not surprised." We walked the perimeter, and Gina pointed out two very clear break-in points, one at the rear entry to the basement where the door had been pried open with something heavy, and the other where the gas feed had been forcibly disconnected from the generator system. The fire had started there, no doubt. "Someone knew exactly what they were doing," she said. "This wasn't just vandalism. This was surgical." And then, like clockwork, Chad showed up. He pulled up in his Tesla, polished, smug, and humming quietly. He stepped out with his stupid recycled fiber vest and his "I'm just here to help" expression. "Tom," he called, arms wide like we were on friendly terms. "I heard about the fire." "Awful news. Just awful. I didn't move. Some of the guys and I." He gestured vaguely behind him even though he was alone. "We're talking about putting together a support fund. You know, community support." I stared at him. "You mean from your imaginary HOA?" He blinked, feigning offense. "Come on now. We're all neighbors here. This could be a turning point for Ridgeview, a chance to rebuild." Together, Gina stepped between us before I could respond. "Mr. Forrest, this is an active investigation. I suggest you leave." He glanced at her, eyes narrowing just a hair. "And you are?" "His attorney." "Of course," he said, smoothing his vest. "Well, if you change your mind, Tom, doors always open." Then he climbed back into his car and disappeared down the ridge. Gina turned to me. "He's rattled." He didn't look rattled. "That's because he's trying to look in control." "But the fire didn't scare you off." And now he's improvising. "Desperate people get sloppy." I didn't say anything. I just kept staring at the spot where Bear's kennel used to be. We found him alive, thank God, but shaken. Covered in soot, coughing up black. He wouldn't leave my side now, not for a second. That night, I stayed in my truck, gun in the glove box, eyes on the tree line. Every snapping twig felt like a trigger pull. The next morning, the fire department's arson investigator returned with his preliminary findings. Forced entry confirmed. Fuel-based accelerant detected. Electrical and mechanical tampering present. No evidence of natural causes. Intentional ignition, highly probable. I asked him if that was enough to open a criminal investigation. "We've referred it to the county sheriff," he said. "But, well, you know." Yeah, I knew. Sergeant Daniels hadn't returned my last 3 calls, but it didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't just a homeowner with a grievance. Now I was a target with a paper trail, and someone somewhere was going to pay for that. By the end of the week, my story was everywhere. Local news, regional blogs, Facebook moms groups, prepper forums. It spread like the fire itself. Everyone wanted a piece of it. And the headline practically wrote itself. "Man refuses to join HOA. Loses house in suspicious fire." But I wasn't interested in viral fame. I wanted indictments. The insurance company sent in a specialized forensic firm. Not the usual clipboard and checklist types, but ex-FBI contractors with high-res drones and thermal scanners. They spent 2 days combing through what was left of my foundation, collecting samples, photographing every inch. By the end of their visit, they handed Gina a preliminary report that read like a checklist of felony arson indicators. Meanwhile, Gina subpoenaed the business registry records for Eco Cluster Communities LLC and its offshoots. It was worse than we thought. Eco Cluster was part of a sprawling web of shell corporations, all tied to the same address in Delaware, a P.O. box used by over 3,000 entities. Chad was listed as development coordinator in at least 4 of them. But then came the real breakthrough. Through a Freedom of Information Act request, Gina obtained a transcript from a civil case in Arizona. Same setup, same M.O., same sudden house fire. The defendant in that case, a man named Mark Forrest, Chad's brother. They'd been running this scheme across 3 states minimum, only this time they picked the wrong mountain. I was sitting on the tailgate of my truck, still parked where my garage used to be, when I saw the first squad car roll in. Unmarked, dark gray, government plates. Then came the others. 2 state troopers, a forensic tech van, And at the front of it all, Sheriff Reynolds from the neighboring county. Turns out, when you go viral enough, someone competent eventually takes an interest. Sheriff Reynolds walks straight up to me. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry for what you've been through. We're taking over the investigation." That was the first time I felt a crack of relief since the fire. They didn't waste time. Within 24 hours, they executed a search warrant on Chad's property. I watched from the ridge, binoculars in hand, as they combed through his house. Not just the main floor, they hit his garage, his storage shed, even dug into the smart home system backups. Later that night, Gina got a call. They found fuel residue in his truck, she said. And get this, 2 red gas cans, one of them still half full, hidden in a crawl space under the garage. But that wasn't even the kicker. They also found paperwork. Maps. Documents referencing your parcel as pending integration upon vacancy. Vacancy. That was the word they used. Like I was a squatter on my own damn land. But the biggest twist came not from Chad, but from the last person I expected, Sergeant Daniels. He showed up at my property the next morning. No uniform, civilian clothes, hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets. He looked like hell. "I need to talk," he said. I didn't invite him to sit. He looked out at the ruins of my house, then down at the mud. I knew Chad from way back, college. He sold himself as a clean energy pioneer, thought he was doing good, building sustainable communities. I helped him here and there, wrote off his signs as harmless, smoothed over complaints. But after the fire, his voice trailed off. I waited. He came to me the next day, said it was a freak accident, asked me to back off. That's when I got suspicious. Daniels looked me in the eye then, the way a man does when he's about to throw himself under the bus and knows he deserves it. I'm going on record. I'll testify. I have texts, call logs. I'll give them everything. And just like that, the dam broke. With Daniels flipping, the sheriff's department had enough to bring charges. They moved fast. Within 10 days of the search, Chad Forrest was arrested on multiple counts: felony arson, attempted fraud, tampering with utility systems, criminal impersonation of a governing entity. The mugshot made the rounds that night. The smug HOA messiah, now in an orange jumpsuit, eyes red, hair flat. No more Patagonia vests, no more laminated signs. But that wasn't the end. The state AG's office opened an official investigation into eco-cluster communities and affiliated LLCs. Several other counties stepped forward with similar stories. People who'd been pressured, threatened, manipulated. Turns out, my fire lit a bigger one. And Chad, he wasn't some rogue HOA nut. He was a frontman in a real estate racket designed to force landowners into selling or abandoning their property under the guise of ecological planning. They'd buy adjacent lots, stage community projects, push fake HOA rules, and bleed their neighbors out through legal harassment or worse. But I didn't bleed. I burned. And I survived. Jail didn't suit Chad. You could see it in the mugshots. Eyes swollen, face pale. That trademark jawline no longer outlined by $1,000 haircuts. Turns out prison lighting doesn't filter out your sociopathy. And even from a cell, he still tried to spin it. His lawyer issued a statement the next morning. My client was engaging in a legal development initiative to promote sustainable land use and has been unfairly targeted by internet hysteria and anti-regulatory sentiment translation. We thought the Mountain Hermit would fold. He didn't. Now we're scrambling, but the internet wasn't done with Chad Forrest. A Boulder-based journalist named Candace Morrow picked up the thread where Gina left off. Turns out Candace had been quietly tracking eco-clusters movements for over a year, filing FOIA requests, chasing shell companies, and interviewing victims who were too scared or too broke to fight back. Once my story broke, she dove in hard. Within 2 weeks, her feature ran on the front page of the Colorado Tribune. Green Grift: How Eco-HOA Developers Used Environmental Language to Steal Rural Land. It was brutal and brilliant. Names, emails, receipts, copies of internal memos where Chad and his partners referred to non-compliant landowners as blockers to be neutralized. One email even mentioned strategic vacancy acquisition through non-lethal pressure. That phrasing haunted me for days. Even Gina looked up from the article and muttered, "These guys weren't just scammers. They were organized predators." The trial was scheduled just under 4 months after Chad's arrest. Fast-tracked due to the public attention and the severity of the charges. But the real bombshell came from someone I'd already buried in my suspicion folder, Sergeant Daniels. He was the first witness. Under oath, Daniels laid it all out. His past friendship with Chad, his early help looking the other way, downplaying complaints, the night of the fire, how Chad had called him afterward, frantic, asking about containment and narrative, control, and, most damningly, the fact that Daniels had once witnessed Chad physically carrying a binder labeled Ridgeview Acquisition Phases, which included my parcel listed under Pending Seizure 2025. When the prosecution showed the binder recovered from Chad's crawl space during the raid, you could feel the air leave the courtroom. Pages and pages of maps, notes, surveillance images. They'd been watching me for months. The jury didn't take long. 18 years. That was the sentence. Arson, fraud, conspiracy, criminal impersonation, unlawful surveillance. It stacked high and fell hard. But what mattered more than the number was the ripple effect. The Attorney General launched a formal task force to investigate fraudulent HOA practices. Multiple counties across Colorado, Arizona, and Idaho began reviewing zoning and development applications tied to EcoCluster and its web of aliases. A handful of properties previously transferred voluntarily were returned to their rightful owners through civil reversal actions. Chad's business partners, most of them hiding behind corporate anonymity, were being subpoenaed one by one. A few tried to settle, others vanished into the weeds, but the house of cards was collapsing, and for once someone in power actually seemed to care. As for me, I stayed quiet through the trial. No press appearances, no interviews. I didn't need the spotlight. I'd already had enough fire in my life for 1 year, but I showed up to every court date, sat in the back, watched. Not for revenge, just to witness the truth win for once. After the verdict, Gina turned to me outside the courthouse. "You know this isn't over, right?" "Yeah," I said. "But this part is." A few days later, I got a call from the insurance company. The full payout was approved, $780,000. Apparently, the arson findings left no room for delay. I could have packed up, taken the check, bought a new cabin in some other state, somewhere with fewer vultures pretending to be visionaries. But I didn't. I stayed, because this wasn't just a house. It was mine. Rebuilding didn't start with wood or concrete. It started with silence. Not the kind I used to love, the crisp, wild stillness of the mountains, but a heavier kind. After the trial, the land felt different, like it had watched the fire and remembered it. Some mornings, I'd walk the ridge and catch myself looking for smoke, even though there was none. Bear didn't roam far anymore either. He stayed close, always listening. But little by little, things moved forward. The insurance payout hit my account in full, $780,000, no deductions. The company had seen enough arson claims to know when not to argue. I didn't touch the money for 2 weeks, just sat with it. Let it become real. Then I hired a crew, not a cookie-cutter contractor team from the city. These were local guys, framers, masons, welders, people who actually understood the land, who wouldn't try to convince me that vinyl siding was efficient or that my solar rig needed to be streamlined for HOA compatibility. No HOA, not ever again. I started with the foundation, concrete slab, reinforced with steel bar grid. Then we went up. 2-story angular build, hardened siding, fireproof sealant on the outer walls, security glass on every window. The old cabin was beautiful, but it was still a cabin. This new place, it was a fortress wrapped in wood. By week 5, the security system was in. State-of-the-art, full perimeter motion sensors, night vision cameras with thermal overlays, independent satellite feed backup, and the server room, buried under 12 inches of poured concrete in the basement. If anyone came near that system again, I'd know before they stepped off the road. And then, on a quiet Sunday, I installed the last piece myself, a handmade sign mounted on blackened iron right at the gate. Private land. No HOA. No fire will break me. It felt good to drive that into the earth, but not everything was physical. While the reconstruction happened, so did the policy fallout. County commissioners passed a unanimous motion. No HOA could be established without a notarized public vote from 100% of affected parcels. Period. No proxies, no development oversight agreements, no soft launch bullshit, every voice, or no HOA. Then came the real kicker. The state passed a reform bill requiring all proposed HOAs to register publicly through a new portal with identity verification, funding disclosures, and penalties for false representation. They named it the Ridgeview Act. Gina sent me the press release with a little smiley face in the subject line. I didn't smile back. I just nodded. One fewer weapon in the arsenal. Strangely, in the months that followed, neighbors I hadn't seen in years started reaching out. Quiet knock on the door, tin of cookies, a six-pack left on the step. No speeches, just presence. People who'd heard what happened and realized how close they'd come to losing their own land, too. One guy, Greg, from down by Mill Ridge, showed up with a weathered folder full of old property maps. "I never trusted that guy," he said. Tried to get me to sign a lakefront stewardship agreement last fall. Said it was just for weed control. Bastard was measuring my driveway. I took the folder, added it to the growing archive Gina and I were building. The thing was, this wasn't just a personal victory anymore. We were tracking cases now. A quiet network of landowners across the state began sharing stories, scans, receipts. And every time someone tried to start another eco-community, we made noise. Legal, loud, precise noise. I wasn't the only one who refused to burn. Still, not everything healed. Some nights, I'd hear a loud crack outside, just a branch falling, and I'd freeze, reach for the shotgun. Bear would growl low, ears locked toward the trees. I'd check the cameras. Nothing. But that's what it does to you. Fire. Even when it's gone, it stays. Fall came fast in the Rockies. The air got sharper, the light goldened, and the ridge that once smelled like smoke now held the scent of pine and stone again. I kept waiting for the burn to return, to feel that dread curl up in my gut like it had after the fire. But it didn't. The new house stood solid. Nothing creaked, nothing failed. No leaks, no strange knocks on the door. Bear had taken back his post at the edge of the deck, sitting in the sun like a sentry who finally trusted the ground again. The county installed a new fire watch tower about 5 miles out. Not because of me, they said, but I had my suspicions. Some scars changed policy. The last loose end showed up in the mail, a letter from the Department of Justice. Formal, impersonal, and satisfying in the way only bureaucracy can be when it finally lands in your favor. It confirmed that several of Chad's business associates had accepted plea deals. Others were still being pursued. But one paragraph stood out. Given your role in exposing fraudulent activity that spanned multiple counties and contributed to real estate exploitation under false governance, this office recognizes your cooperation as materially significant. You may be contacted in future civil or legislative reviews. I pinned the letter inside the house. Not out of pride, out of memory. Later that month, I hosted a small gathering. Just a dozen people. Neighbors, the crew who helped rebuild, even Gina, who finally brought her infamous cast-iron skillet cobbler. We didn't call it a party, just food and firelight and laughter around a pit that didn't destroy anything. Someone asked if I'd ever sell. Not in this lifetime, I said. Another asked if I'd ever join an HOA. I laughed. Only if it's one where I get to build the bylaws in .308 caliber. They laughed, but not too hard. Some of them had seen what I'd seen. Some had almost been next. After everyone left, I walked the property line one more time. No flags, no signs, just trees and stars. At the edge of the drive, I stood before the sign I'd made. Blackened iron, bold letters, no apologies, private land. No OOA. No fire will break me. But I added something. One last line carved beneath the rest, burned in with a torch, uneven and rough, but honest. Rebuilt stronger, watching louder, ready always, because this wasn't just home anymore. It was a warning and a promise.